How do you fare, my loyal 9 patriots? Have you ever wondered why the scholastic institutions are able to take advantage of the average American kid and turn them into a communist Marxist that hates America and hates white people? Stay tuned, because in this video I'm going to show you how this happened so you can protect yourself, your kids, and your community. Because right now the communist left is intellectually shooting at us, and we are not intellectually returning fire. So get ready, because in this video, I'm going to arm you with an information-packed intercontinental ballistic missile. So let's get to it. Back in 1923, a Marxist law professor named Karl Grunberg created the Frankfurt School, which later on was referred to as Karl Marx University. But the Frankfurt School was associated with the Institute for Social Research at Goethe University Frankfurt in Frankfurt, Germany. It was funded by Felix Weil, who actually received the money from his grandfather, who owned a shipping business. Weil was a Marxist socialist who hated capitalism, which is ironic because he had no problem taking money from his capitalist grandfather, much like the college students of today. But in a nutshell, the Frankfurt School was a conglomerate of, quote, intellectuals that were Marxist, anti-capitalist, anti-positivism, that focused on social research and then developed critical theory, which gave birth to critical race theory, feminism, the anti-white movement, political correctness, sexual revolution, cultural Marxism, and so much more. Once the Frankfurt School was fully established, many professors and associates came aboard. But the main four we're going to talk about is Herbert Marcuse, Erich Fromm, Theodor Adorno, and Max Horkheimer. However, there are some other critical people that we will glance at throughout that really highlight how evil the Frankfurters were. So let's get started. Herbert Marcuse joined the Frankfurt School in 1933, but due to him being Jewish, along with the rest of the Frankfurt School, they had to flee Germany. Ultimately, Marcuse and other Frankfurters ended up in the United States, the one country that would allow them to have freedom. But that freedom they clung to, the very freedom that welcomed them with open arms, they wanted to destroy it. Before the United States entered the Second World War, Marcuse, along with the other Frankfurters, looked at the United States with disgust. People were happy with their friends and family, enjoying life, and just simply being Americans. The Frankfurters only saw the negative. They criticized the American way and began developing ways to bring down the West. This was in part because Karl Marx's prophecy of, quote, workers of the world would unite and bring down capitalism just wasn't going to happen in the United States and Western societies. So they invented the, quote, victim class. They created the new proletariat, and they programmed and activated a domestic war against the very society that would allow them to do so: America. This is why we see class warfare. Black versus white, gay versus straight, because the Frankfurters like Max Horkheimer, who was a former director of the Frankfurt School, believed in seeking, quote, human emancipation, even if someone is already emancipated, such as the Americans they were witnessing, because they will implant this false perception that you are enslaved, so then they can act as if they are the liberators freeing you from slavery, when in reality you were free. But they manipulated you and lied to you so you would enslave yourself. So then we see Marcuse, or as he was sometimes referred to as the father of the New Left, because he was so influential that he sponsored the student upheavals during the 1960s, and communist students would march with signs that would say, quote, Marx, Mao, Marcuse. But we see Marcuse and the Frankfurters begin their infiltration of the scholastic institutions, starting in 1935 with Columbia University, and from there, the indoctrination of America's youth begins. But what is interesting about Columbia University is this is the same place where the Pulitzer Prize for Journalism is awarded, and if you watched my Enemy of the People's video, the confirmed NKVD spy, Isidore Feinstein Stone, received a journalism award from the same Columbia University. And the man that was key at placing the Frankfurters at Columbia was the radical leftist Edward R. Murrow, which Senator Joseph McCarthy was going to expose, but we all know how that ended for him. But pressing forward, once the United States entered the Second World War, the FDR administration hired some of the Frankfurters, like Marcuse and Franz Neumann. Newman worked for the OSS and was writing intelligence reports, but he was also a confirmed Soviet spy. Marcuse also worked for the OSS, and he worked for the Office of War Information. These are the very organizations that Senator Joseph McCarthy said had been infiltrated by communists. See my previous video if you want more information on that. But once World War II ended, Marcuse got back to work infiltrating the scholastic institutions and poisoning the minds of the American youth. Marcuse and the Frankfurters believed that if you wanted to force a social change, you have to focus on three aspects: the political landscape, economic landscape, and societal landscapes. This was done via their invention of the new proletariat that we talked about earlier, critical theory, the Mao invented term political correctness. To paraphrase Bill Whittle, critical theory is their sword because they can attack and criticize every aspect of society and create division. But their shield is partisan tolerance, aka political correctness. Marcuse instructed his acolytes to sell their totalitarianism as tolerance. He created a guide on how to shut down debate and silence the critics of critical theory. But put into practice, this guide is used to stymie every challenge they are faced with. For example, calling you a racist, sexist, homophobe, you name it. But these attacks only work on people that aren't racist, sexist, or homophobic. Again, paraphrasing Bill Whittle, if you call a KKK member a racist, he's going to give you a blank stare and say, "Your point?" This combination is effective because the communist left has no values or principles and are guided by false theories that have time and time again been proven incorrect. This is why you can never debate a leftist. The scholastic institutions have programmed them so much that when faced with a real challenge, they immediately short-circuit and result to insults, false accusations, and violence. But what is so frustrating about the Frankfurters and Marcuse, besides the fact that they blame Western culture for the rise of the Nazis because we didn't accept Marxism, is the people that influence them. They're influencers that the mainstream outlets just casually leave out of the picture and pretend they don't exist are people like William Reich and Martin Heidegger. Marcuse was on board with William Reich's sexual liberation, or to quote Marcuse, polymorphous perversity, meaning people having sex in every way and with whatever they want. But what places like Wikipedia and other mainstream sources won't tell you about Reich is his sexual degeneracy. He tried to have sex with a housemaid at age 4. He lost his virginity at age 11. He sexually pleasured animals, fantasized of having threesomes with his mother and her lover, and he masturbated to his mother, masturbated to male servants, and he even masturbated to infants. And this is just what Reich has admitted. Reich's work and views were so evil that he was kicked out of many countries such as Denmark and Sweden for his, quote, blatantly subversive nature of his political and theoretical work, and he was even kicked out of the Communist Party. This surprised Reich because Stalin and Lenin used to preach sexual liberation, quick and easy divorces, freedom of abortion, and devaluation of a parental authority, aka progressive policies. These progressive policies, though, were all the same things Reich believed, but Stalin and Lenin knew the power for sexual liberation and of the progressive policies. But they also knew it was a fallacy, an act, to get a nation destabilized and to momentarily satisfy the masses with the sexual degeneracy. However, though, once they were in power, all the progressive policies were rescinded and tyranny ensued. The second influencer of Marcuse and the Frankfurters is the Nazi philosopher named Martin Heidegger, the father of deconstruction. He believed that every thought or piece of writing from the past had to be examined and torn down. Heidegger wasn't shy about his dream for the destruction of the West. He even stated, "When the spiritual strength of the West fails and its joints crack, when the moribund semblance of culture caves in and drags all forces into confusion and lets them suffocate into madness." But how were Marcuse and the Frankfurters so successful at spreading their message? At this point, we know the Frankfurters taught at many universities, including Columbia University, Princeton, Harvard, University of California, and they traveled all across the United States at different universities to teach. But Marcuse, he also taught at Brandeis University. But what the mainstream outlets will not tell you is that Marcuse worked with violent radical communist Angela Davis. The same Angela Davis who was on the FBI's most wanted list for purchasing weapons for the Black Panthers that were used to kill a judge and take others hostage. But don't fret, she was awarded the Lenin Peace Prize. And if you remember from my BLM video, Davis is very influential to BLM, and the BLM founders consistently thank her for her influence and support. Here is just one example on how they radicalize people. Marcuse mentored Davis while she was working on her doctoral studies, taught her philosophy, and even sent her to the Frankfurt School in Germany, which at the time was exchanging information with the Soviet Union. This was in part due to the Second World War ending, and many of the Frankfurters went back to Germany in the early 50s. While in Germany though, Davis ended up living in communist East Germany and was awarded a doctoral in Marxism. And from there, she came back to the United States to ultimately become a professor at many universities, and today she is a professor at University of California, Santa Cruz, doing the exact same thing the Frankfurters did to her and so much of America's youth. But the story doesn't end here.